everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah, great to be back.
So today we're going to be diving into a collection of YouTube videos about forbidden technologies.
The inventors behind them.
Exactly, and it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, really compelling. We've got stories of inventions that could have changed the world.
But for some reason, they never quite made it.
Right. It's like they got lost or forgotten or maybe even suppressed.
Yeah, a little conspiracy.
Yeah.
Never hurt anyone, right?
Right. So are you ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's get started.
Okay, so first up, we have Viktor Grebennikov.
The bee guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
the bee guy.
I love this story.
So Grebennikov, he was a Russian entomologist, and he was obsessed with insects.
Really obsessed.
Oh, yeah. He spent his life studying them, and he believed they held all sorts of secrets.
Like what?
Well, one of his most famous claims was about something he called the cavity structural effect.
The what?
The cavity structural effect, or CSE for short.
Okay, what is that?
Well, Grebennikov believed that certain geometric shapes, particularly those found in insect nests,
Like honeycombs.
exactly like honeycombs, he believed that those shapes could create a kind of force field.
A force field. Are you serious?
I know it sounds crazy, but that's what he claimed. And he even said he built a flying platform using this technology.
A flying platform, so like a hoverboard or something?
Kind of, but more like a small platform that could lift a person off the ground.
And this was all based on the structure of honeycombs.
That's what he said, and he claimed it could reach incredible speeds and even make the rider invisible.
No way invisible. That's like some serious sci-fi stuff.
I know, right? But of course, Grebennikov's claims were met with a lot of skepticism.
I can imagine the scientific community wasn't exactly embracing the idea of bee-powered anti-gravity.
Yeah, really. His patent applications were denied, and a lot of his research was dismissed as pseudoscience.
That's too bad. So what happened to him?
Well, he continued to study insects and write about his theories, but his work never really gained mainstream acceptance.
That's a shame. It makes you wonder if there was something to his claims.
It does, and it leads us perfectly into our next story, which is about another inventor who challenged conventional thinking.
Oh, this is going to be good. Who are we talking about?
Henry Ford,
Henry Ford. Wait, the car guy?
the one and only.
I thought he was all about Model Ts and assembly lines.
He was, but he was also a big believer in the potential of renewable resources.
Really?
Oh, yeah. In fact, in the 1940s, he unveiled a car made entirely from hemp.
A hemp car? What, are you serious?
Totally serious. The car body was made from a hemp-based composite material that was super strong and lightweight.
And I'm guessing eco-friendly too?
Hemp is a very sustainable crop. It grows quickly and requires minimal pesticides and herbicides.
So why didn't this hemp car catch on?
Well, there are a few theories. Some say it was simply too ahead of its time.
What do you mean?
Well, the petroleum industry was booming back then, and oil was cheap and plentiful.
So a car that didn't run on gas wasn't exactly a top priority.
Exactly. And there was also the growing stigma surrounding hemp because of its association with marijuana.
That makes sense. So the hemp car just kind of faded into obscurity?
Pretty much. It's a shame because it was a really innovative concept.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what other potentially world-changing inventions have been lost or forgotten over the years.
It does. And it brings us to our next story, which is about an inventor who claimed to have discovered a source of free energy.
Free energy? Now, I got to hear about it. Tell me more.
So this inventor, his name was T. Henry Moray, and in the 1930s, he claimed to have built a device that could tap into what he called radiant energy.
Radiant energy. What's that?
Well, he described it as a boundless energy source that exists throughout the universe.
So basically, unlimited power.
That was his claim.
And did this device actually work?
Well, there are numerous accounts of Moray demonstrating his device and powering various electrical appliances.
What kind of appliances?
Light bulbs, radios, even a small motor.
All without any external power source.
That's what he claimed.
That's incredible, but if he really had discovered free energy, why isn't he a household name?
Well, Moray was very secretive about the details of his invention.
Why is that?
He claimed to have been threatened and harassed because of his work.
Threatened by who?
He never named names, but he implied that powerful interests felt threatened by the prospect of free energy.
That's a classic conspiracy theory, but it makes you wonder.
It does, and it leads us to our next story, which is about an inventor who explored the power of water in a way that most people wouldn't even imagine.
Water. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
This inventor, his name was Victor Schauberger. He was an Austrian naturalist, and he had this deep fascination with water.
What kind of fascination?
Well, he believed that water was more than just a substance. It was a living force with incredible potential.
Interesting. So what did he do with this belief?
He spent years studying water and its movements, and he came up with some pretty radical theories.
Like what?
Well, for example, he believed that water could generate its own energy through a process called implosion.
Implosion, isn't that the opposite of explosion?
Exactly, and he built several devices that were designed to harness this implosive power of water.
What kind of devices?
One of his most famous inventions was called the repulsine. It was a saucer-shaped device that was supposed to generate lift through the creation of a vortex.
A vortex like a whirlpool.
Exactly, a whirlpool of air or water.
So he was basically trying to build a flying saucer powered by water.
In a way, yes. But Schauberger's work was controversial, and it was never fully accepted by the scientific community.
Why not?
Well, his theories were pretty unconventional, and he didn't always provide the kind of scientific rigor that would convince mainstream scientists.
So his ideas were dismissed as pseudoscience.
Pretty much. But even today, some people believe that Schauberger was onto something.
That he really did tap into some hidden power of water.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder if there are other forces of nature that we haven't fully understood yet.
Okay, I'm ready for another story. What's next?
All right, let's talk about a place called Coral Castle.
Coral Castle, isn't that a tourist attraction in Florida?
It is, but it's also a mystery.
A mystery. How so?
Well, Coral Castle was built by a single man, Edward Leeds Kalman. And no one knows for sure how he did it.
What do you mean?
Leeds Kalman used massive blocks of coral rock, some weighing up to 30 tons, to construct this incredible structure.
30 tons? That's heavier than an elephant.
I know, and he did it all by himself without any heavy machinery.
How is that even possible?
That's the mystery. Leeds Kalman was a very private man, and he never revealed his methods.
So there are no blueprints or diagrams?
Nope, none whatsoever. People have been trying to figure out how he did it for decades.
What are the theories?
Well, some believe he had some kind of secret knowledge of ancient construction techniques.
Like the Egyptians or something?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Others think he might have discovered some kind of lost technology, maybe something related to magnetism or acoustics.
Acoustics, could sound waves really move those massive stones?
It's a long shot, but some people believe it's possible.
Wow, this is fascinating. It's like a real-life Indiana Jones adventure.
It is, and it shows that there are still mysteries in the world that we haven't been able to solve.
Yeah. Okay, so Coral Castle is a mystery that might never be solved, but what about inventions that were actually built and tested? What's next on our list?
All right, let's talk about the Williams X-Jet.
The X-Jet, what's that?
It was a one-man VTOL aircraft developed in the 1980s.
VTOL, you mean vertical takeoff and landing?
Think of it like a personal jetpack.
A jetpack? That's awesome.
Did it work?
It did. The X-Jet could fly in any direction, hover, and reach speeds of up to 60 miles per hour.
That's incredible. So why didn't it become the future of transportation?
Well, it had some limitations. Its range was fairly limited, and it wasn't very practical for carrying cargo.
I guess those are pretty big drawbacks.
They were, and ultimately the U.S. Army, which was interested in the X-Jet for military purposes, decided not to pursue it.
So the jetpack dream was grounded?
For now, at least.
No.
But it's a cool example of how inventors are always pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
It is. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm ready for more. What else you got?
Let's revisit a character we talked about earlier.
Wilhelm Reich?
Ah, yes, the Orgone energy guy.
That's the one. Now, remember we talked about his orgone accumulators? But Reich also claimed to have invented a device that could manipulate the weather.
Manipulate the weather? Are you serious?
Totally serious. He called it the Cloudbuster.
The Cloudbuster. That sounds intense. So how'd it work?
Well, according to Reich, the Cloudbuster could draw orgone energy from the atmosphere and either concentrate it or disperse it.
And this could affect the weather.
That was his claim. He said he could use it to make rain disperse clouds and even influence the movement of storms.
Wow, that's some serious power. So did it actually work?
Well, there are numerous accounts of Reich using the Cloudbuster and seemingly producing some pretty impressive results.
Like what?
Well, there's a famous story about him using the Cloudbuster to end a drought in Maine.
Really? So he made it rain?
According to the accounts, yes. But of course, Reich's claims were met with a lot of skepticism from the scientific community.
I can imagine they weren't too keen on the idea of someone controlling the weather.
Nope. They considered his theories pseudoscience, and they dismissed his claims about the Cloudbuster.
So was Reich a visionary or a charlatan?
That's a question that continues to be debated to this day.
It's fascinating and a little bit scary to think that someone might actually be able to control something as powerful as the weather.
It is... All right, ready for another story?
Hit me with it.
Okay, this one is about the General Motors EV1.
The EV1 wasn't that an electric car?
It was the first mass-produced electric car.
And this was back in the 90s.
Yep. In the late 90s, GM released the EV1, and it was a pretty impressive vehicle.
So what happened? Why aren't we all driving electric cars today?
Well, there are a lot of theories about why the EV1 was discontinued.
Like what?
Well, officially, GM said it was because of limited battery range and lack of consumer demand.
But there are conspiracy theories too, right?
Oh, yeah, lots of them. Some people believe that the oil industry pressured GM to kill the EV1.
Because it threatened their profits.
Exactly. And there's also the fact that GM rounded up and destroyed almost all the EV1s that were leased out.
Wait, they destroyed them. Why would they do that?
That's a good question. Some say it was to prevent the technology from falling into the wrong hands.
Wrong hands, like who?
Well, maybe competitors, or maybe even people who would try to reverse engineer the technology.
That's pretty wild. So the EV1 is like a lost chapter in automotive history.
It is, and it makes you wonder if the future of transportation could have been very different.
Okay, let's talk about another inventor who claimed to have made a breakthrough in a field that's often dismissed as pseudoscience.
All right, who are we talking about?
Dr. James D. Mould and his work on a cancer-free cigarette.
A cancer-free cigarette. Is that even possible?
Well, that's what Dr. Mould claimed back in the 1950s. He was working for Liggett and Myers, a major tobacco company.
And they were trying to develop a safer cigarette.
Exactly. They knew that smoking was linked to cancer, and they wanted to find a way to reduce the risks.
So what happened?
Well, Dr. Mould and his team actually made some progress. They developed a prototype cigarette that used a special filter to remove harmful substances from the smoke.
So they were close to creating a truly safer cigarette.
It seems that way, but then something strange happened.
What do you mean?
Liggett and Myers abruptly shut down the project.
Why would they do that?
There are a few theories. Some say it was because the company was afraid of lawsuits
Lawsuits from whom?
from smokers who had gotten sick from their regular cigarettes.
Ah, I see. They were worried that admitting they could make a safer cigarette would open them up to liability?
Exactly. And there's also the theory that the other tobacco companies pressured Liggett and Myers to kill the project.
Because a safer cigarette from one company would threaten the entire industry.
Precisely so. Dr. Mould's work was buried, and the world never got a chance to see if a cancer-free cigarette was truly possible.
That's a shame. It makes you wonder how many other potentially life-saving inventions have been suppressed for financial or political reasons.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already, but there's one more story I want to hear about.
All right, weigh it on me.
Lester Hendershot and the Hendershot generator.
Ah, yes. Another inventor who claimed to have discovered free energy.
So what was his story?
Well, in the 1920s, Hendershot claimed to have built a device that could harness energy from the Earth's magnetic field.
So basically unlimited power.
That was his claim. And he even demonstrated his device to the public, powering light bulbs and motors seemingly out of thin air.
So why isn't he a household name?
Well, like many inventors who claim to have discovered free energy, Hendershot faced a lot of skepticism and opposition.
From whom?
Well, some scientists dismissed his work as pseudoscience, and there were also rumors that he was pressured to suppress his invention.
Pressured by whom?
It's not clear, but some people believe that powerful interests felt threatened by the prospect of free energy.
That's a familiar theme.
It is, and sadly, Hendershot's story ends in tragedy.
What happened?
In 1961, he was found dead.
Dead? How did he die?
Officially, he was ruled as suicide, but the circumstances surrounding his death were suspicious.
So suspicious in what way?
Well, some people believe that he might have been murdered to silence him and prevent his invention from being developed.
That's a chilling thought. It makes you wonder if there are forces out there that are actively working to suppress technologies that could change the world.
It does, and it makes you question everything you thought you knew about science and progress.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing stuff, right?
It is, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Exactly. There are so many more stories out there about forbidden technologies and the inventors who dared to dream big.
So what's next?
Well, I think it's time to take a break and let all this information sink in.
Yeah, good idea. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have, but don't worry, there's plenty more to come.
I can't wait to hear what other secrets the world of forbidden technologies has in store for us.
Me neither. We'll be back soon with more incredible stories and mind-bending theories.
Until then, keep those thinking caps on and stay curious.
Absolutely. The truth is out there.
And we're on a mission to find it.
Exactly.
See you next time.
See?
All right, so we've delved into inventions that could defy gravity power our world with free energy and even build structures that seem impossible.
It's been quite the journey so far.
It has, and now I'm ready for more. What other forbidden technologies are out there?
Well, let's dive into a story that revolves around a controversial figure in medical history, a man who claimed to have discovered a cure for cancer.
A cure for cancer. That's a bold claim. Who are we talking about?
Royal Raymond Rife.
Rife. I've heard that name before, but I don't know much about
He
him.
was a brilliant but eccentric scientist who in the early 20th century claimed to have developed a technology that could destroy cancer cells.
Destroy cancer cells? How?
He built something called a beam ray device.
A beam ray device. What is it? Some kind of laser?
Well, it wasn't exactly a laser as we know it today, but it was a device that emitted electromagnetic waves.
And he believed these waves could target and kill cancer cells.
Exactly.
So was he right? Did it work?
Well, that's where things get complicated. There were reports that Rife's treatments were successful in some cases. Yeah. But his work was met with a lot of resistance from the medical establishment.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, his methods were very unconventional.
Unconventional? How?
Well, he didn't believe in surgery or chemotherapy or radiation.
It's just standard cancer treatments.
Right. Instead, he focused on this beam ray technology, which most doctors and scientists at the time considered to be quackery.
So they dismissed his work.
Pretty much they refused to accept his findings, and they did everything they could to discredit him.
So what happened to Rife?
Well, his career was ruined, his lab was raided, his equipment was destroyed, and he ended up dying in obscurity.
Wow, that's a sad story.
It is, and it makes you wonder if there was more to his work than the medical establishment was willing to admit.
It does. Okay, let's move on to another story. What else you got?
All right, let's talk about Thomas Townsend Brown.
Thomas Townsend Brown, who was he?
He was an American inventor and physicist who in the 1920s claimed to have discovered a link between electricity and gravity.
Electricity and gravity. Are you talking about anti-gravity?
That's what Brown believed. He called it electrogravitics.
Electrogravitics. So what exactly did he claim to have discovered?
Well, he believed that by applying high-voltage electric fields to certain materials, he could create a force that could counteract gravity.
So he thought he could make things levitate.
Exactly. Did it work? Well, Brown built a number of devices that he claimed demonstrated this electrogravitic effect.
What kind of devices?
Well, they were basically capacitors with one plate charged to a very high voltage.
And these capacitors could actually move.
According to Brown, yes.
Mm-hmm.
He said they would move in the direction of the positive electrode.
So he thought he had discovered a new form of propulsion.
Exactly, a propulsion system that didn't require rockets or propellers.
That's incredible. So what happened to his work?
Well, Brown's claims were met with a lot of skepticism from mainstream scientists.
They didn't believe him.
Not really. They said his results could be explained by more conventional phenomena, like ionic wind.
Ionic wind, what's that?
It's basically the movement of charged particles in the air, and it can create a small amount of thrust.
Ah, I see. So they thought Brown's devices were just being pushed around by ionic wind?
Exactly.
But Brown insisted that he had discovered something truly revolutionary.
He did, and he spent the rest of his life trying to prove it.
So what happened?
Well, his work never really gained mainstream acceptance, but it did inspire a lot of other researchers who are still exploring the possibilities of electrogravitics today.
Wow, that's fascinating. So even though his theories were dismissed, he might have sparked a whole new field of research?
It's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, ready for another story?
Absolutely, hit me with it.
All right, let's talk about Harry Hoxsey.
Harry Hoxsey. I don't think I've heard of him.
He was an American entrepreneur who, in the early 1900s, developed a controversial cancer treatment.
A cancer treatment? What was it?
He called it the Hoxsey method, and it was a combination of herbal remedies and other alternative therapies.
So like a natural cure for cancer.
Is how he marketed it.
And did it work?
Well, there are a lot of anecdotal reports from people who claim to have been cured by the Hoxsey method.
Really?
Yeah, but the medical establishment was not impressed.
They didn't believe it worked.
Nope, they called it quackery, and they went after Hoxsey with a vengeance.
What do you mean?
Well, the American Medical Association and the FDA, they launched investigations, they raided his clinics, they tried to shut him down.
So he was basically persecuted for trying to help people.
That's how his supporters saw it.
But if his treatments were really working, wouldn't there be some scientific evidence to support that?
Well, that's the thing. Hoxsey never really conducted any rigorous clinical trials.
So there's no way to know for sure if his treatments were effective.
Not really. It all comes down to anecdotal evidence, which is not very reliable.
So is Hoxsey a genuine healer or a con man?
That's a question that is still being debated to this day.
It's a fascinating story, and it raises some important questions about the role of alternative medicine and the power of the medical establishment.
It does. Okay. Ready for another deep dive?
Bring it on.
All right, let's talk about planned obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence.
What's that?
It's basically the practice of designing products to break down or become obsolete after a certain amount of time.
So companies intentionally make things that don't last
Exactly. Why would they do that?
to keep people buying new stuff.
Ah, that's so cynical.
It is, and it's a huge problem. It's wasteful, it's bad for the environment, and it's just plain unethical.
So are there any examples of planned obsolescence in action?
Oh, yeah. Tons of them. One of the most famous is the Phoebus Cartel.
The Phoebus Cartel, who are they?
They were a group of light bulb manufacturers who in the 1920s conspired to limit the lifespan of incandescent light bulbs.
Wait, they intentionally made light bulbs that burned out faster?
Yep, they wanted to make sure that people had to keep buying new bulbs.
That's outrageous. Did they get away with it?
Well, for a while they did, but eventually their scheme was exposed and the cartel collapsed.
Good riddance.
Agreed. But the practice of planned obsolescence is still alive and well today.
So we're still being manipulated into buying new stuff all the time.
Pretty much.
Okay, let's shift gears back to the world of medicine.
All right, what do you have in mind?
I want to talk about Linus Pauling,
Linus Pauling, the Nobel Prize winner.
the one and only.
He was a brilliant chemist, but he was also a bit of a controversial figure.
How so?
Well, in his later years, he became obsessed with vitamin C.
Vitamin C, like the stuff in orange juice.
Exactly. He believed that high doses of vitamin C could cure everything from the common cold to cancer.
Really?
Yeah, he wrote a book about it called Vitamin C and the Common Cold.
So did it work?
Well, the scientific evidence is mixed. There's some evidence that vitamin C can help boost the immune system.
But can it really cure cancer?
Most medical experts say no.
So Pauling was wrong.
Well, it's not that simple. He is a brilliant scientist and he's very passionate about his beliefs.
But he was also wrong.
It seems that way. But his work did spark a lot of interest in the role of nutrition in health and disease.
So maybe he wasn't entirely off base.
Maybe not. Okay, ready for another story?
Yeah, bring it on.
All right, this one is about Eugene Melov.
Eugene Melov. I don't recognize that name.
He was a scientist and science writer who was a big proponent of cold fusion.
Cold fusion, isn't that the idea of creating nuclear fusion at room temperature?
That's right.
But isn't that impossible?
Most scientists believe so, but Melov was convinced that cold fusion was real, and he dedicated his life to promoting research in this area.
So what happened to him?
Sadly, he was murdered in 2004.
Murdered. Why?
The case is still unsolved, but there are theories that his death might have been connected to his work on cold fusion.
You mean someone killed him to silence him?
It's a possibility.
Wow, that's chilling.
It is, and it makes you wonder what secrets are still out there and what lengths people might go to protect.
I need something a little less intense after that story.
All right, how about this one? It's about an inventor named Paul Pantone.
Paul Pantone, never heard of him. What did he invent?
A device called the GET fuel processor.
The GET fuel processor? What does that do?
Pantone claimed that it could convert almost any type of fuel into a clean-burning gas.
Any type of fuel? Like what?
Water, waste oil, even plastic.
Are you serious? That sounds too good to be true.
It does, and a lot of scientists dismiss Pantone's claims as pseudoscience.
But did it work?
Well, there are a lot of anecdotal reports from people who claim to have built and tested GET devices and said they worked.
So maybe he was onto something.
Maybe, but Pantone was also a controversial figure. He was very secretive about his technology.
Why is that?
He said he was afraid that someone would steal his ideas.
That makes sense, but it also makes it hard to verify his claims.
It does, and to this day, the GET fuel processor remains a mystery.
Another unsolved mystery in the world of forbidden technologies.
Exactly. Okay, I think we've covered enough ground for now.
Yeah, my head is spinning with all these stories.
I know it's a lot to take in, but that's the beauty of this topic. It makes you question everything you thought you knew.
It does, and it makes you realize that there's still so much that we don't understand about the world. Okay, so we've explored inventions that were suppressed, maybe even buried because they threaten the status quo.
Right, some pretty wild stories.
They are, but for this last deep dive, I'm kind of curious to look at someone who actually succeeded.
Someone whose invention changed the world.
Exactly, someone who made a real impact.
Okay, I think I have just the story for that. Let's talk about Rudolf Diesel.
Rudolf Diesel, the diesel engine guy.
The one and only.
Okay, so everyone knows about diesel engines. They're in trucks and ships and all sorts of heavy machinery.
Right, they're known for their power and efficiency.
But I gotta admit, I don't know much about the man himself.
Well, Diesel was a brilliant engineer born in France in 1858, and he was obsessed with engines.
Obsessed.
Yeah, he was always tinkering, trying to improve existing designs and come up with new ones.
And this was back in the late 1800s, right?
Exactly, a time when steam engines were still the dominant form of power.
So what made him focus on a new type of engine?
Well, Diesel was concerned about the limitations of steam engines.
What kind of limitation?
Well, they were inefficient, they were bulky, and they required a lot of fuel.
So he thought he could do better.
He did, and he set out to create an engine that was more efficient, more powerful, and less polluting.
And that's how the diesel engine was born?
Exactly. After years of research and experimentation, Diesel developed an engine that used compression ignition to burn fuel.
Compression ignition, how does that work?
Well, instead of using a spark plug to ignite the fuel, like in a gasoline engine, a diesel engine compresses the air in the cylinder so much that the fuel ignites spontaneously.
Ah, I see, and that makes it more efficient.
Exactly.
So the diesel engine was a revolutionary invention.
It was a transformed transportation and industry.
And it's still widely used today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Diesel's story doesn't have a happy ending.
What do you mean?
Well, in 1913, he mysteriously disappeared from a ferry crossing the English Channel.
Disappeared. What happened to him?
His body was found a few days later, but the cause of death was never definitively determined.
So it's a mystery.
It is, some people believe he committed suicide, others think he might have been murdered.
Murder. But why?
Well, Diesel's invention had made him a wealthy and powerful man.
So he had enemies.
Possibly, some people believe that rival inventors or industrialists might have wanted him out of the picture.
That's a dark thought.
It is, but Diesel's legacy lives on his engine, continues to power the world, even though the man himself met a tragic end.
Wow, what a story.
It is a story of brilliance, innovation, and mystery.
Just like all the stories we've explored in this deep dive.
Right, we've journeyed from the depths of the ocean to the far reaches of space.
We've encountered inventors who were hailed as geniuses and others who were dismissed as crackpots.
But they all shared one thing in common:
What's that?
a passion for pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
A desire to create something new, something that could change the world.
Exactly, and whether their inventions were ultimately successful or not, they all left their mark on history.
And they've given us a lot to think about.
They have. So, what are your takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, I guess the biggest one is that the world is full of mysteries.
Mysteries and possibilities.
Exactly, and we should never stop questioning, never stop exploring, never stop wondering what if.
I couldn't agree more, so keep those thinking caps on, keep those imaginations fired up, and keep searching for the truth.
Because the truth is out there somewhere.
It is waiting to be discovered.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of forbidden technologies.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, keep questioning everything.
Stay curious.